Welcome back. I'm Lynda Kinkade. I just want to recap our breaking news. You saw here on CNN just minutes ago, US President Joe Biden calling on the House to take up the US foreign aid bill that was just passed by the Senate in the early hours this morning. $95 billion in all. Donald Trump's firm grip on the Republican Party could derail hopes that a US aid package to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan will become a reality. The US Senate passed the $95 billion bill this morning, but it faces an uphill battle in the House. That's thanks in large part to the former president, who has made his opposition to the legislation clear. Earlier, Mr. Trump posted, "From this point forward, are you listening, US Senate? No money in the form of foreign aid should be given to any country unless it's done as a loan, not just a giveaway." Well, will the bill even make it to the House floor? Let's welcome in CNN political commentator and Republican strategist, Alice Stewart. Good to see you, Alice.
Hi, Linda. Good to see you.
So this $95 billion foreign aid package for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan passed through the U.S. Senate. We just heard that desperate plea from the U.S. president to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, saying take it to the floor for a vote. There's a big question mark over whether he'll even do that. How do you see this playing out?
Look, I certainly applaud the president for trying to advance this, speaking directly to House Republicans, but that is going to do absolutely nothing to sway them in any way, shape, or form, because they are listening to one person, and that is former President Trump. And despite Trump's characterization that this money is a giveaway, and some people say it's charity, this is not. This is a $95 billion investment in democracy, and providing this necessary funding to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan is important for the safety and security of not just those countries and those regions, but for America. And we all know that if by some chance with regard to Ukraine, if Vladimir Putin was successful there, that's just the first step. What is next? Who is next? And it potentially could be the United States of America. So I think it's important to advance this. Look, it is disheartening and frustrating that there was not some amendments added to this package that would address some of the concerns of Republicans, such as border provisions to help secure the U.S. border. And also there were some requests to have some cuts elsewhere to offset some of this spending. None of that was added. But look, this isn't a done deal yet. I would like to see that Republicans are going to be open to having this discussion. But speaking with rational Senate Republicans today, they say, look, we didn't get everything we wanted, but this is better than nothing in terms of this necessary aid. And it's important to advance this, and hopefully over in the House, they can have further discussions to get a little bit more that would help this bipartisan legislation move forward.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully they can get to that point of bringing it to the floor. But I have to ask you, Alice, how much influence, how much sway does Trump have on the Republican Party right now? Does he have a firm grip on it?
He has a stranglehold on it, Linda. There's no disputing that. And look, we saw even before language of the spending plan came out, former President Trump had encouraged the House Speaker and Republicans to oppose legislation when they weren't even exactly certain what was in this. And, you know, there's not too off-the-wall speculation that a big part of pushing back on this is simply because former President Trump does not, want to see the spending move forward, and he wants to see some type of securing the border. And now this new talk of him saying, let's consider this a loan and not just direct payments, that's certainly never going to happen. But there are a lot of things that absolutely need to get done, but there's the political calculation as we're months away from the next election, is that Donald Trump simply doesn't want Joe Biden to have a win, specifically when it comes to securing the border, but also in advancing legislation and funding that would go to help some of our key allies in the globe. And it's important that we continue to support our allies because they're going through a terrible, difficult time, and we need to be there for them.
And of course, throughout the next 9 months, less than 9 months now to this election, Trump is facing one legal case after the next. Do you think any will prevent him from actually being on the ticket, on the ballot come November?
It doesn't appear that way. And, you know, more than anything, what we're seeing is that, at least in terms of his support from Republican primary voters only intensifies or has solidified each time there is additional litigation or additional legal incidences against him. Because, Lynda, as you know, he has managed to convince the Republican base that all of these legal issues against him, all of the different cases, he wraps them up in one fell swoop and saying this is overzealous prosecutors. This is weaponization of the Department of Justice because they see Donald Trump as a key threat to Joe Biden, and they're using this as a way to inadvertently destroy democracy because he is a threat to Joe Biden. Of course, that's not the case. Each and every legal issue is separate in and of themselves and should be addressed accordingly. But in terms of Republicans voting for him to get on the ticket, they're not dividing him. And the issues where we have some states that have tried to prevent him from being on the ballot, we saw it in the state of Colorado and Maine and potentially elsewhere. We're seeing that the legal system is saying you can't not do that. He deserves, if he receives the number of electorates and he receives the delegates necessary, he should be on the ballot, and it's for the people to decide whether or not he gets on the ballot. And we also are seeing the Trump campaign and the Trump team continuing to appeal each of these legal issues that comes before him. And Lynda, that just further delays this on the legal calendar, which could potentially move it closer to or even past the election in November.
Yeah, that is true. We are watching it all closely. Alice Stewart, good to have you with us today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lynda.